So to create an after trigger, we use the create DDL command, create trigger, and switching to the family database. Let me give us some more room. So the syntax is create trigger, the name of the trigger on a table, and then after, because it's an after trigger, and either insert, update, or delete. If it gets fired for more than one of those events, you can put them comma delimited and say after insert, comma, update, comma, delete. And then after the as goes all the code that will be executed by the trigger, the same way that you create stored procedures with a stored procedure name as in a bunch of code. A note here is before SQL Server 2000 there was only one kind of trigger, the after trigger. So the old syntax is just to say for, and for backward compatibility purposes you may still see some code with the for there in place of the after. So let's execute and create this trigger. Completed successfully, the trigger now exists. If we want to see the trigger, opening up Object Explorer, scrolling down to the family database, looking at the tables, it's on the person table. So if we look at the person table under triggers, there's trigger 1. We could select modify or script trigger as alter to view the code if we wanted to. So what this trigger is going to do is whenever we're doing an insert on the person table, it'll simply print out in the after trigger at the stage when the after trigger would fire. To test this, we'll insert Brandy Flanagan, and it prints out in the after trigger. As you're designing your after triggers, keep in mind that you can have multiple triggers on a single table, and even multiple triggers for an event on a table. So you don't have to organize your triggers with one large trigger for everything happening for an insert and another large trigger with all the code that occurs during an update, and to be forced to duplicate code between that insert and that update trigger. So the way I recommend to organize your triggers is to do that by a purpose. For example, if you have a trigger that handles a complex RI, which we'll see in a little while, you could make that a create trigger complex RI on table for insert, comma, update, and then have another trigger that handles archiving old data, and another trigger that handles updating the modified column, things like that. So I would recommend organizing the triggers based upon their purpose. That just is a slight introduction to working with after triggers, and there's a lot more coming up about them.